got to be a better way of studying than the typical garbage that I've been taught at school. Like, no disrespect, if it works for you, that's cool. But the whole, like, draw a pretty mind map, use lots of colour and put a daisy in the corner and you remember everything. I'm like, yeah, fully, that's lovely. It did jack for me. But fortunately, I began to see that there are certain study skills which did work better, and more importantly, I began to study psychology and realized that there are ways that the human brain works all the time, which we use on a daily basis, which help us just cope in the world, that most people don't know how to use academically at school or varsity. But if you adapt the way that your brain likes to work, it's possible to do incredibly well academically. So using these skills that I put together, now remember, I barely got into Rhodes University at all. As Craig said, minimum possible number of points required to get in. But using these techniques, within months of starting varsity, I was getting straight distinctions. I got my first psychology degree with distinction. I then got my psychology honours postgraduate degree cum laude, which is just Latin for super good, basically. I was then allowed to skip 2 years and study a master's degree in a subject that I didn't even have a major in. So your point is, after that, I was given full academic colours by the university, and I was then invited by both the universities of Oxford and Cambridge to continue my postgraduate research overseas. I chose to go to Oxford because it's the most famous university on earth. And having finished at Oxford, I'm now back in the most beautiful country in the world, in the most beautiful city in the world, teaching the most beautiful students in the world how they can do better academically. Now everyone, Craig's story is fairly similar. The reason Craig is now speaking is because he was the very first student that I ever taught, and immediately cut down from 12 hours a day of studying the exams to 4 hours. Now I know that sounds scary, but it's 1/3 of what he had to do instantly. And more importantly, he went from average marks in everything, like 50s and 60s for everything, to being in the top 3 for every single subject he did at university, including being the top politics student in the whole university, the top sociology student. Craig also stayed in the top 3 in his law class all the way until final year, when he was getting a distinction average for the 8 subjects he was taking. At varsity you normally do 3 in a year. He was taking 8, and maybe the most impressive thing of all, he had stopped taking notes in class, because he had just developed his memory to such an extent that he was memorizing as the lecturer spoke and used the textbook afterwards. After that, he did a master's, also top student at the varsity, cum laude, and also got some scholarships where he went to study in Oxford, where he was also one of the top students, also one of the top students at Oxford, and got a distinction for his dissertation on the mafia. He went to Sicily to study the mafia. Anyway, so the point of this long story, guys, is that only a few years ago we were very average, and now we are absolutely fabulous. Because we're going to try to teach you about today. Now, the 2 things that changed our academic life, which we're going to give you a basic introduction to, if you listen to today's talk properly, it will increase your marks, I have no doubt about it. So, the 2 things that changed our life was, one, you see all the papers there? Okay, so, everyone, the 2 things that changed our lives the most was, one, we learned how human memory works and how you can use your memory better. And 2, we learned about speed reading. I'm going to start with speed reading because I can quantify it. I can attach numbers to it. How many words per minute do you think the average South African can read by the time they finish the trick? Okay, raise your hands and guess. Obviously, we're talking about people who are reading a language they're fluent in, obviously. So what do you think the sort of average is? Raise your hands, words per minute. Any guesses? 5 or 10. It's a lot more than that, okay? Now, I'm very worried about you, but thank you for getting the ball rolling. Okay, anyone else? Yes. No, it's much more than 60 a minute. Much more, yes. What? It's less than 300. Raise your hands and guess. Oh, the genius in the front of the Now, guys, that statistic comes up again and again. Whether you go to England or to the United States or to Canada or to New Zealand, people reading English as a first language tend to be reading between 200 and 300 words a minute by the time they finish high school. Now, I learned to speed read. Within a few months, I was reading up to 5,000 words per minute. So if you do the mental arithmetic, that's about 20 times the national average, and I've increased since. Now, obviously, people sometimes say, well, that's lovely, you are clearly a robotic freak. To which I say, that's not true. When Craig and I teach speed reading, which we've taught around the world for many years, the actual official statistic is that more than 95% of people that we teach double or better their reading speed in a single day, okay? In fact, the stat's about 98. Even in this little class, we're going to only do a 5-minute exercise with you, and I'm willing to bet you're going to see an increase just today. It's something anyone can do, and something even incredible. We taught a girl called Adrian last year from Cape Town, who was one of the best readers that we ever taught. Within an hour, she was reading 7,000 words a minute. So it's something anyone can do, you just need to be shown how. But it's rather boring to speak about, it's much more interesting to see. Would you like to see some?
Yes.
Bring forth books. As the Lord did say, go forth and multiply, I say bring forth words. Okay, guys, so here's the biology. Yeah, we want to cover this. Geography, anything else? Biogeography. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Guys, I don't do much of this, so you are going to have to watch. Okay, this is talking about the heat differential which occurs within a cell when the cell is basically undergoing metabolic processes, so cellular respiration specifically. Up to 60% of the energy which is produced in the cell gets converted into heat, which obviously is useful for warm-blooded animals and things like that. So that's just a very Are you watching? Okay. This is basically, okay, this is page 1.1. Okay, so this is talking about the way that you use a polygon to depict a vector, because obviously a vector is a quantity which has got both direction and magnitude. So you can't simply depict it on a simple graph. What you've got to do is indicate both the magnitude and the direction in that particular shape. So basically that it's telling you how you can do that basic depiction. Okay, this is going to be the last one. Okay. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to just get to the beginning of the chapter. Okay. Are you watching, guys? Okay. This is talking about drainage basins, riparian zones, and it's basically talking about the fact that they started with this very adorable statistic. Well, 70% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, only 2% of it is usable by human beings. So, I mean, obviously that's quite cute, but the point is that they're saying that because only 2% of the Earth's water resources are actually usable by human beings, you obviously need to make advantage of where you can find that accessible water, and clearly the whole point is the drainage basins, which basically means whenever you have some area of relief, like mountains or so, which tend to catch rainfall and channel them into streams and rivers and so on, those are obviously the sources that you have to access. The riparian zone simply refers to the area of excessive vegetation which typically occurs on either side of a watercourse, because it means that the plants get an opportunity to drink the stuff. Okay. Now that we've shown you, would you like us to teach you a little? Okay. So guys, the good news is that speed reading is not something which only a couple of random people can do. It's not confined to the geniuses of the world. It is something which anyone in the world can do, because it uses a natural mental process. You filter information all the time. You cannot help but filter information. For instance, if you look at me, none of you get 121,416 hairs, do you? Instead, you just get the overall point. Oh, so smooth and silky, or whatever. In the same way, when you read something, taste something, touch something, your brain is always filtering out the odd stuff. So let's take something you might have read, like, the glorious and mighty Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage across the Atlantic when tragically it struck into an iceberg and sunk beneath the cold waters of the ocean to a watery grave. What have I told you? As the Titanic sank, you'll notice none of you say, none of you repeated word for word at high speed. Because, guys, a lot of the words are unnecessary or obvious because you know them already. Your mind's built up the knowledge. So, for instance, the glorious and mighty. No kidding, you get rid of that. Titanic you keep, else you're confused. Set sail on the maiden voyage. I know that across the Atlantic, well, duh, because the Indian, they wouldn't have died of hypothermia. So you get rid of that. When tragically it wasn't exactly happy, so you get rid of that. It struck into an iceberg. It was not attacked by a pod of rabid killer whales. So the point is, your brain chucks out the obvious stuff. And in the end, it is left with the stuff which is core, which in this case is Titanic sank. Now the point is that is not something your brain can do. That is something your brain is forced to do. You could not notice all the hairs on my head if you tried. Okay, why not? Why does your brain always filter the information out instead of noticing everything? Because, what? Because it's unimportant. Now that tells how it's filtering out. It says that's unimportant because it's predictable. But why would it not be able to even if it tried? Yes? It would overload. There's too much information. Your brain would overload. If it noticed every single grain of wood at the bottom of the floor, you couldn't cope with it. So instead, what you have to do is you notice the core information. And speed reading just utilizes that basic ability. That's why anyone can do it. Okay, so we're now going to do a basic exercise with you just to help you out. I'm going to point out one thing though, because people often say, but Paul, I see the problem. The problem is if I can now skip information because I know it, the problem is I don't know my science as well as I know the Titanic, so surely I wouldn't be able to speed read it. If you are reading something that you don't know, you can't filter out as much, but you can always get rid of something. Like if I say, the glorious and mighty Titanic, comma, captained by John Smith and the longest ship of its day, said sailing over the Atlantic, water, great. Now what have I told you? Titanic sank and what else? Captain John Smith and the longest ship. Okay, now the point is, your brain knew that that stuff was different. It didn't bother saying, oh, I don't care about the captain. It noticed that is new. And in the same way, if you're reading your science or your geography, more stuff will bounce out. But some of the stuff clearly can be discarded. Now, in order to teach you, now we can't teach you speed reading in depth. It doesn't take long. It only takes about 2 hours to learn, but we've only got 5 minutes with you. So we're going to teach you something called quick reading. Quick reading basically uses some of the aspects of how speed reading works, but it's quite easy to impart and it's useful. Like if you guys are now in neutral, we're going to take you up to second gear. Okay, full speed reading is fifth gear, we'll take you to second. I'm willing to bet you'll see an increase within the next few minutes. Now, as I speed read, you will notice that I ordinarily do something which is quite unusual.
Yeah, you kind of hum them.
I do that sometimes, but no, not always. Apparently once in a school I was singing, and the school they said, no, you really were singing. That's very strange. Like, I don't normally sing.
He was, guys, he was.
Okay, but ordinarily there is something else which I always do. What is that? I use a finger. And the reason I'm using the finger is simple. Have you noticed that ordinarily when you read, you hear a little voice in your head saying the words, that once upon a time there was a... Have you noticed that, okay? Now, it's not schizophrenia usually. What it is basically, it's called sub-vocalization. Subconscious vocalization. Without you thinking about it, you're saying the words to yourself. And basically, you can speed that voice up a lot. That's what I'm doing with the finger. I'm forcing the voice to go faster than it would ordinarily want to go. So we're going to do a very simple exercise with you. We don't have terribly long, but I want you to find some... Who doesn't have a textbook? Raise your hands. Okay, good. Most people do. I'm sorry if you don't, but it gets something to read if you can. What we are going to do is, for 20 seconds, which Craig is going to time, you are going to read normally. You're not going to use the finger to push your eye any faster, okay? So you're not going to use the finger exactly. We get some very unusual responses.
Some people know what I'm talking about.
At some schools we've arrived and people have like wind up reading and doing this and stuff. Okay. If that works for you, that's amazing. Okay, guys, so what we want you to do, for 20 seconds, read absolutely normally. Do not push your eye with the finger. Just read normally. Okay. And begin in 3, 2, 1, and read. Stop reading. Okay, now, guys, that's what you managed to read in 20 seconds, so if you need to cry, do it now. Now what I'd like you to do, please move to the next paragraph at the beginning of the next section super fast, because we need to get onto memory, okay? And again, you're now going to read, but this time, use the finger and push that voice to say the words as quickly as it can. Do you get what I mean? Okay, but obviously don't go too fast. Just make sure you're saying every word, but very quickly. 3, 2, 1, and read. And stop. Okay, awesome. Now guys, do you notice a bit of a surprise already? Okay? Most people, that already increases them. You're now up to first year.
Yes. Look, I'm not going to point out who this was, but I saw 2 people sharing a page, and they're kind of doing this in the air with everything. Ain't gonna work, people. Ain't gonna work.
Come on, Apple, you okay? Anyway, sorry, I could see Craig laughing, so I knew something funny was going on. Anyway, everyone, now, you've gone from neutral to first gear, but here's an obvious point. if you go so fast that that little voice in your mind cannot possibly say every single word, what's it going to have to do? It's going to have to, no, that's not it. There's something else. It's going to have to cut out some words. Now, obviously, if you go too fast, you're going to cut out important stuff and not know what's going on. But as soon as you start cutting out some words, what are the first words to be cut out? The and nobody needs those to comprehend. Like if I say dog ate cat, you don't say, there are no thes, I don't understand. Okay? Obviously, you know what's going on, am I right? So, now what we're going to do, this is getting into second gear. All you are going to do is use that finger and force yourself to go so fast that some words are not said. You might see the verb, but you mustn't say the verb. Does that make sense, guys? Don't go so fast that you're confused, obviously. But just make sure that that voice occasionally doesn't bother saying a couple of the words, that's all. So, everyone get ready? What? No, new one. Okay. Of similar difficulty. So,